Welcome back to another exciting episode on hidden secrets in books. As you guys know, we only bring top guests to our show. We take our time to sort out for the best guests to bring on the show. Like I said, and I always say top 1% of guests. And you guys know they are mostly authors because here we are here to unravel the hidden secrets in books. To talk about things that people have put into writing, years of experiences put into writing, a lot of secrets about how to live, how to navigate life that people have put into writing. So today we have a very special guest as always. Today's guest is Pam Dwyer. Pam, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, Pam, I would like you to introduce yourself to my audience.
Okay. My name is Pam Dwyer, and I host a podcast called Delay the Binge. And I am a best-selling author and a speaker. But I write as PJ Hamilton. I do have a pen name, and I write as PJ about my life experiences in East Texas, growing up in an abusive and dysfunctional childhood, and how I used that situation to help me write better.
All right, thank you so much for that wonderful and short introduction. So I will add that our guest today is the best-selling author and speaker and host of the Delay the Binge podcast. After overcoming a childhood marked by abuse, neglect, and adversity, Pam discovered that lasting transformation doesn't happen in the reaction, it happens in the pause before it. Today, she helps high achievers overcome emotional exhaustion, break unhealthy patterns, and build lives rooted in intentional choices rather than automatic reactions. Once again, Pam, welcome to Hidden Secrets in Books.
I'm so glad to be here. Very excited.
Okay, so your book introduces the idea of quiet depletion. What is quiet depletion, and why do so many successful people fail to recognize it?
Well, quiet depletion is what happens when someone looks like they're doing fine on the outside, even very thriving and very successful. But on the inside, they're mentally exhausted. I mean, they're responsible, successful, dependable. Everyone thinks they're handling life beautifully, and they are until they aren't. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens one pattern at a time. And I know this because I lived it myself, and I didn't realize I was carrying years of unhealthy patterns until counseling and journaling helped me finally see it and realize that it was not only destroying me mentally, but physically. Quiet depletion can affect you in a lot of ways.
Okay, thank you so much, Pam. So you write that the problem isn't the binge, is the pain beneath it.
Certainly. I mean, people often think about binging as, well, binging is about food, and it's a lot more than that. It's about behaviors that are not serving you. And what interests me a lot is the moments before we have a reaction or an unhealthy habit or behavior. And it could be overeating, but it could also be overworking, overpleasing. It shows itself in a lot of ways where we take something to the extreme. And even though we know it's not good for us, we still continue to do it. And so I started asking why. So those behaviors are usually trying to solve something deeper. So my work with Delay the Binge is helping people become curious about that moment before the reaction. And I believe if we can change what happens in a pause, the moment before we do something, we can change the direction of our lives.
Okay. So why do intelligent, high-achieving people often repeat behaviors they know are hurting them?
Because high achievers or very, highly motivated people are really good at functioning. And a lot of times we mistake functioning as flourishing. We think, I'm still getting everything done and I'm doing it the best way possible and I'm successful, so I must be okay. But eventually our bodies begin whispering what our minds have been ignoring. I mean, the body is a well-oiled machine. And the brain can control, a lot of the expectations that we've laid on ourselves since childhood. We are told what's expected of us and what success looks like, and we believe it.
Okay. So, one of the central themes in your book is the moments before the reaction. Why is that moment so powerful?
Well, like I said before, it's the brain patterns. The brain, it loves patterns, whether they're good patterns or bad. But the brain will always resort to what it's always known. So if you are highly stressed or anxious or angry, whatever emotion it is you're trying to cope with, the brain will say, "Hey, the last time you felt this way, you grabbed a cigarette or you ate a piece of chocolate cake and it really made you feel better for a little bit. So let's do that again." And so the brain wants you to do something that doesn't serve you well, even though by smoking cigarettes, it could actually kill you. By doing drugs or drinking too much alcohol, that that's not good for you. But your brain is trying to tell it, the lower part of your brain, which I refer to as the caveman, is just telling you, "Hey, this worked last time. This is what I remember. Let's do it. And then tomorrow, we'll think about something else to do." And that frontal part of your brain, the frontal cortex, is the CEO, right? It's the smart. It's what makes you think clearly. It's offline when your lower brain's in charge. And the lower brain is fight or flight when it panics, when it's trying just to appease you temporarily. But in order to bring the frontal cortex back online, you have to pause before you react. So before you light up that cigarette or whatever habit you're dealing with, you pause for a moment and you think to yourself, "Why am I about to do this? I know it doesn't serve me. Why?" And that brings the frontal cortex back online. And then you can think about all the reasons you might be wanting this cigarette that, you need to address, you need to realize. But a lot of people don't. They just ignore what's really going on. I can give you a perfect example. I used to weigh over 300 pounds and I was very unhealthy. And it's because I used food as an emotional release. But I just thought, it was just for today. It's just temporary. But before I knew it, I was high blood pressure, diabetes, overweight. So I thought, well, the only thing I can do to control my eating, because I've tried everything, is to go have surgery. So I went and had bariatric surgery to make my stomach really small, like a little pouch, to control my eating. And the first year, it worked. I lost over 100 pounds. And it was a big transition for me. But after that first year, I started to regain the weight. And it's because I never addressed what was really going on. I thought the tool would do it all for me, but I had not addressed the real issue, which were a lot of issues from my childhood, growing up the way I did. And I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of self-worth issues that I had not ever really addressed. And as long as that was living inside of me, then unaddressed, then that's when the quiet depletion happens and you start becoming, reliant on things that aren't good for you. And we all do it in one way or the other. You don't have to be from an abusive childhood to struggle with this. It could be anything. It could be self-worth. It could be anxiety. It could be anger. But whatever it is, you refuse to look at because you don't want to go there. But you have to address it. You have to start getting curious and looking at it so you can get some clarity about why you're really in this unhealthy situation.
Okay, Pam. So your book also distinguishes between transformation and maintenance. What is the difference and why does it matter?
Oh, wow. Maintenance is the whole reason I developed this framework of Delay the Binge. I realized after a year after this surgery that they taught me everything. They prepared me. Everyone, I went to a psychiatrist. I went to, a nutritionalist to prepare for this transition where I could only eat 4 ounces of food at a time. But they never once talked about maintenance. If we learn, weight, for example, if you learn how to maintain your weight whether it's 300 pounds, 400 pounds, whatever it is. If you learn how to maintain it first, then you can take that knowledge and apply it to improving your situation. But what a lot of people do, even if it's with, other habits, other unhealthy patterns, if you don't learn to maintain your progress, you're just going to go and back to where you were, because that's what the brain likes. The brain likes to go back to old patterns where it's comfortable. And so if you learn how to maintain, and how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of things that need to be done in small, intentional steps. You cannot fix this overnight because it's taken your whole life to develop this pattern. So there are a lot of small, intentional steps you can take to start you on this journey of maintenance.
Okay, thank you so much, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
What practical tools do you offer in your book to interrupt unhealthy patterns?
Well, unhealthy patterns are very stubborn, because like I said before, the brain really relies on what it knows and what it temporarily thinks it fixed. And so you've got to develop new habits, new patterns that serve you. And the only way you can override the unhealthy habits is by creating new ones. And you can do that in a lot of ways. The one thing that I recommend to everyone is to journal. I know a lot of people roll their eyes because they think, I don't have time to journal, to write in a book. Now, I can take my digital journal and speak to text while I'm going down the road. And I always tell them that's not the same thing. When you speak your emotions, that is a release, right? It's like a relief. Yeah, that's why we go to counseling. That's why we go to therapy. We talk about our emotions. But every therapist, every psychologist will tell you, okay, when you leave here today, I would like for you to journal your feelings each day until you come back here in between appointments. And most people don't want to do it. But let me tell you what the difference is. When you write with a pen to paper, your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, you're doing two things. One, you're processing what is happening. When you speak it, you do not process it. It's just a temporary relief. So when you write with pen to paper what you're feeling, you will have a way to process what's happening. Also, you need to write your emotions because guess what? I don't know about you, but I don't know what I was thinking or feeling 2 weeks ago. I have no idea. I know what I'm feeling today, but I don't know what I was feeling 2 weeks ago. So if you journal once a day for 2 weeks in a row, I promise you, just commit to 2 weeks of trying it out. You will see a pattern that you did not know was there because you'll read over your last 2 weeks of whatever was happening and you'll think, wow, I keep seeing this same pattern over and over. But if you don't journal, you cannot possibly begin to understand what your real patterns are, what you're really struggling with. So journaling is just one of many ways to start this slow, intentional process to clarity.
All right, Pam, thank you so much for that wonderful answer, for breaking down what it means to succeed for those who have tried willpower over and over and didn't get success. So, one of your most powerful messages is your past does not define you, it prepares you.
Mhm.
How can readers begin to see their own story through that lens?
Well, I am a storyteller first, and I really believe we all have a story inside of us that can serve us and help us to improve our lives in one way or another. But other people's stories can help us too. And so the plus one theory is all about doing your best plus one more and finishing stronger than you started. Because and I actually discovered this when I was in the 8th grade, and I'm going to tell you how I did that. And that'll help people remember the plus one theory. And when I was in 8th grade, I was living a very abusive life at home. I was pretty much physically beaten almost every day. And so I was weak, and we didn't have food, so I was malnourished. So whenever I went to gym class, sometimes the coaches would say, okay, girls, we're going to do the timed mile. I want you to run around this track 4 times without stopping. And I just hated it because I was very weak. I didn't have the stamina to do 4 laps around a track. So the rule was if you stopped, you had to start over. So the other girls would finish and they would all be waiting on me. And we did this timed mile a lot throughout the year. So one day the coaches said, okay, girls, we're going to do the timed mile. And so I thought, I'm just going to do a little slow trot. That way I won't stop and it'll look like I'm running. And so I did this little slow trot, the first lap. And man, I wanted to stop because my lungs were burning, my legs were burning. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to keep going. I'm going to have to stop. And then I thought about the unfairness of my situation. Why on earth do the other girls have a wonderful home life? They have a great mom and dad. They have a clean home. They have plenty of food. All they got to worry about is what kind of clothes what outfit they're going to buy next. And I started getting angry. So the more angry I got, the faster I ran. And the more I cried, the faster I ran. It didn't matter that my legs were burning or my lungs were on fire. I just kept running. And before I knew it, I was in a full-on sprint. And I finished that 4th lap before anyone else. And I fell to the ground and I thought I was going to pass out. But instead, I just laid there catching my breath. And I thought, what on earth was that? Where did that energy come from? I didn't even know I had that inside of me. What was it? And so I gave it a name so I could refer to it. I called it +1. So from then on out, every time I was in trouble or felt weak or like I couldn't do something, I thought to myself, I'm just going to +1 it. And for some reason, that would tap into that energy resource that all of us have. And I was able to do what I needed to do to survive and to eventually thrive. But it taught me that just because you think you cannot get something done or you think it's the worst day of your life, it really isn't. You just have to dig into the +1 and realize that tomorrow's going to be here and you might as well do the best you can +1 more. So willpower, you mentioned willpower. Delay the Binge is not about willpower or discipline. It's about just starting where you last left off and then adding a little more effort and then finishing stronger than you started. Don't give up. It's not the end of the world. You cannot keep starting over or you're not going to get anywhere. So the +1 theory is all about realizing, okay, I screwed up today. I did not do what I thought I promised myself I would do. And so I'm going to start where I left off. You're not going to start over. And you'll eventually slowly make progress. Promise. The end.
All right. So, if you could leave listeners with one message from these entire conversations and from your book, probably one secret you would leave them from your book, what would you hope stays with them for the rest of their lives?
I guess I'm thinking, okay, I want to talk about the importance of stories. I think stories give us what advice never can. Advice tells us what to do. Stories allow us to discover it for ourselves. That's why they've survived every generation. Long after we forget facts, we will remember stories. And one thing I'd love to leave with your listeners is this. Your past doesn't define you. It prepares you. Use it as fuel. Whatever happens to you that affects you in a bad way, just remember to see it as fuel for energy. Struggles can be stepping stones into what you were always meant to be. So every chapter of your life, even the painful ones, can become part of someone else's healing if you're willing to let it. And that's why I write. And that's why I podcast, is just to hopefully help and impact just one person. Because that somehow makes everything that happened to me, that somehow makes it worth it, And that's all I have to say.
All right, Pam, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your story and life-changing principles from your book. The message reminds us that healing begins with awareness. Growth happens one intentional choice at a time.
Yeah.
And our path can become the foundation for a strong future. For our listeners out there, if today's conversations resonate with you, be sure to pick up Pam's book and explore more of our work through the Delay the Binge podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on Hidden Secrets in Books.
You're so welcome. Thanks for giving me a voice today, Dominic.
All right. Have a wonderful day ahead.
You too.